You were taught to be good, not because it makes you powerful, but because it makes you predictable. You were told that if you work hard, if you're kind, if you wait your turn, someone will notice, someone will reward you. The world will be fair. That's the myth that raised you. A myth designed to keep you docile. Here's the truth. Power doesn't reward goodness. It rewards perception. It rewards control. It rewards silence. Every time you speak your mind without leverage, you lose ground. Every time you act with emotion instead of calculation, you give power away and someone sharper takes it. Let's be clear. There's a reason the most dangerous people don't yell. They don't beg. They don't chase. They wait. They control the frame. And when they strike, they don't ask for forgiveness. They simply disappear. But you've been conditioned to believe that honesty is power, that expression is strength, that showing your cards is authenticity. No, that's exposure. That's how you become a pawn. Power does not need to be real. It only needs to be believed. And that belief is built not on truth, but on how you control appearance, emotion, and access. You thought you were gaining respect by being transparent. You weren't. You were giving the world a map to control you. Every time you opened up, someone was quietly noting where your pressure points lie. Every time you tried to please someone stronger, reshaped you without resistance. Every time you expected fairness, you were silently disarmed by those who knew better. Machiavelli never said be evil. He said, it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But let's be precise. Fear here is not violence. It's control of perception. It's not reacting. It's being unreadable. Look around you. The co-worker who's liked by everyone but promoted by no one. The friend who vents to everyone and becomes emotional wallpaper. The nice guy who gets ghosted by the very woman who once called him her rock. It's not because they're weak. It's because they're exposed, predictable, accessible, forgettable. The opposite of power isn't weakness. It's visibility without control. Here's what you weren't told. People don't fear what they understand. They fear what they can't read. So when you say too much, when you explain yourself, when you perform your goodness, you are becoming less than human. You are becoming a system that can be decoded. And once decoded, you become useful, not respected, liked, but not feared, employed, but never irreplaceable. Real power is not loud. It is the silence others project their fears onto. Machiavelli knew this. He watched rulers fall not because they were too harsh, but because they trusted love over leverage. You still think respect comes from being nice, but niceness is not a currency. It's a sedative. Respect comes from mystery, control, and emotional distance. It comes from being just out of reach, but always in the room. Ask yourself, how often do you speak just to be heard? How often do you share to feel seen? And now ask what would happen if you stopped. You think people would get closer to you? But in truth, they would become uncertain. They would start studying you. They would become careful. They would begin respecting the boundaries they can't name. Because that's what power is, being unreadable, yet undeniable. You were taught the opposite. You were taught to be relatable. Let me ask you something. Why do you think the most powerful men, the true alphas, the ones who walk into a room and change the oxygen, speak the least? Why do they listen with still faces? Why do they never rush to explain? Because they know the moment you make yourself easy to understand, you make yourself easy to use. So yes, everything you were taught about power is wrong. You were trained to perform for social approval. But social approval is only power when it's given reluctantly, never when it's begged for. You were trained to be expressive, but the moment you react emotionally, you become visible and therefore controllable. You were trained to trust people who understand you, but people don't need to understand you. They need to respect the consequences of crossing you. This is where your mind must shift, from visibility to invisibility, from sharing to withholding, from emotion to equilibrium. When you remove your need to be liked, something terrifying happens. The people around you begin adjusting themselves to fit your presence. And you say nothing. Because power never explains. Power is the absence of emotional need. You're not here to be loved. You're here to be known, silently, to move through rooms like a shadow with gravity, to say less and control more, to be remembered without ever being fully understood. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming untouchable, not through armor, but through absence. They can't kill what they can't reach. This is only the beginning. In the next part, I'll show you exactly how people test your power and how most men fail without knowing it, and how a Machiavellian mind doesn't fight it. It uses the test to dominate, in silence. You don't realize it's happening because the test is never announced. No one says, "This is the moment where I'll decide if I can control you." It doesn't come with a warning. It comes in a joke at your expense, a delay in response, a small boundary pushed, a stare held 1 second too long, a silence after your request. And how you react in those moments defines your position forever. This is how power is decided, not in big victories, but in the micro moments. Not when you're ready, but when you're emotionally exposed. And here's the brutal truth. Most men fail this test not because they're weak, but because they're reactive. They feel the pressure and they flinch. They over-explain. They defend. They laugh to blend in. They raise their voice to appear dominant. Or they go silent in shame, not strategy. You think you're keeping the peace, but what you're actually doing is bleeding credibility. You've just told the room, "I need something here. I need approval. I need belonging. I need to be seen as good." And in that moment, your body language, not your words, places you beneath them. They may never speak it, but from that second forward, your value drops. Not because you're worthless, but because you're readable. Let's take an example. You're in a meeting. You offer an idea. Someone smirks. Another interrupts. A third says, "Interesting," with a flat tone. Now pause. Your instinct will be to explain more, to reframe, to seek validation. Wrong move, because now you've shifted the frame. It's no longer about your idea. It's about your need to be validated. You've gone from power to persuasion, from certainty to need. And Machiavelli would call that your downfall. You think power is about control, but deeper than that, power is about frame. Who is leading the emotional reality of the moment? Who is reacting? And who is being reacted to? If you are reacting, you are not leading. And if you are not leading, you are being measured, sized, studied. Here's what a Machiavellian mind would do in that meeting. Say less. Let the silence hang. Watch the discomfort shift to them. Let their smirk echo in the vacuum. Let their interruption expose their insecurity. Let their interesting fall flat without energy. You don't need to argue your value. You don't need to protect your idea, because power doesn't need to move to be felt. It needs to make others shift their position just by existing. This isn't just about meetings. It happens in every domain of your life, in your relationships. She'll test you not to destroy you, but to define you. She'll ask, "Can you say no without guilt? Will you collapse when she withholds affection? Can she shift your mood with a single tone?" She won't say it out loud, but she's observing it all. Not because she wants to control you, but because she wants to know who she's dealing with. And if you're moved by every emotional flicker she throws, she won't hate you. She'll just never fully trust you. Because a man who can't hold his frame is a man who can't protect a future. You think holding frame means being dominant? No, it means being unshakable. It means not rewarding manipulation with reaction. Not shifting just to avoid conflict. Not raising your voice just to feel in control. You don't need to match their energy. You need to remain the baseline they can't affect. This is why people test to see if your center is real or if it was just performance. Machiavelli warned about this centuries ago. He said everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. And when they do experience you, you must make sure what they feel is controlled unpredictability. They don't know what you'll allow. They don't know how you'll respond. They don't know how far they can push. And that uncertainty creates gravity. Because we don't test what we don't respect, and we don't respect what we can easily move. You will be tested always, not because they hate you, but because they're wired to know their place in the power hierarchy. And you must train yourself to recognize the test and never flinch. Because the man who flinches loses the frame. And once you've lost the frame, everything else is negotiation. They will poke, they will delay, they will dismiss you, they will joke. And the moment you bite, you become the clown. The moment you react, you become the product. The moment you over-explain, you become the servant of your own image. Stop playing to be liked. Start playing to be untouchable. Let them wonder where your limits lie. Let them feel the weight of your silence. Let them adjust themselves to your presence, not your performance. Because in the game of power, the moment you explain yourself, you've already lost. In Part 3, we'll break down how to build strategic invisibility, how to disappear in plain sight while amplifying your influence. You won't raise your voice. You won't beg for recognition. You'll become what they talk about when you're not even in the room. Power doesn't come from attention. It comes from absence. You've been trained to think the opposite. That to be powerful, you need to be known, recognized, celebrated. But the more visible you are, the more vulnerable you become. Because once they can see you, they can measure you. Once they can measure you, they can plan around you. Once they can plan around you, you are no longer a threat. You are a feature of the environment, not a force within it. Understand this, a lion isn't dangerous because it roars. It's dangerous because you don't know when it will. Visibility gives others the illusion of understanding, but power comes from being misunderstood strategically. You don't need to vanish. You need to become unreadable. You don't hide. You control access. You don't explain. You create silence. You don't argue. You let the absence of your reaction raise questions louder than your words ever could. Let's call this strategic invisibility. This isn't passivity. This is domination through opacity. It's what Machiavelli saw in the most effective rulers, the ability to remain unseen in motive, unclear in emotion, and unpredictable in consequence. So how do you build this? 1. Stop broadcasting your thoughts. Every time you speak your plans, they lose their teeth. Every time you post your wins, you train people to expect your rhythm. Every time you share your emotional state, you hand someone else a lever to move you. Do you really think a man who moves with power announces his every intention? No. The one who moves in silence holds the cards because no one knows what he's doing until it's already done. You think visibility makes you influential, but in reality, influence works in reverse. The less they know, the more they fear, the more they guess, the more they talk. And the more they talk, the more your silence controls the narrative. That's not mystery. That's power geometry. 2. Limit your reactions. In a room, the most reactive person is the most controlled. You can spot him instantly, the one whose face shifts with every word, the one who corrects, who explains, who pleads for clarity. But the one who controls the room, still face. Delayed response. Not because he's weak, but because his silence forces others to fill it. They speak more. They reveal more. They second-guess themselves. Because silence isn't emptiness. It's a mirror. It reflects their fear, their insecurity, their doubt while your position remains intact. In warfare, the best defense is camouflage. In psychology, the best defense is stillness. You don't need to fight. You just need to be the one who doesn't flinch. 3. Speak less, but strike harder. You don't speak to perform, you speak to direct. The Machiavellian man doesn't flood the room with words. He introduces one concept, one direction, one boundary, and lets it echo. And because he doesn't speak often, when he does, everyone listens. The absence has built tension. The silence has built authority. The delay has built weight. This is how the powerful weaponize presence by controlling scarcity. A constant voice becomes background noise. A rare voice becomes law. So speak rarely, speak precisely, and make each word a loaded weapon. 4. Be seen, but never fully known. Let them see your moves, but never your reasons. Let them witness your rise, but never your process. Let them hear your voice, but never your intention. Because when people think they know you, they stop respecting you. They begin assuming your decisions. They project their understanding onto you. They treat your presence like furniture always there, never questioned. But when they don't know why you do what you do, when they can't predict your next step, when they feel your presence but can't decode your psychology, they adjust to you. And that adjustment, that shift in their behavior, that is your shadow influence. The most dangerous man in any room is not the one talking. It's the one watching. You don't have to dominate people to dominate power. You only need to be the silent gravitational force around which they orbit unknowingly. And that's what strategic invisibility is, controlling the field without being touched. Being the unseen pressure they feel. Being the question they can't answer. The plan they can't counter. The silence that makes them speak more than they should. This is not charisma. It's not charm. It's discipline. It's resisting the urge to be seen when you could be felt. It's choosing impact over explanation. And it's understanding that the more you reveal, the more they prepare for you. So you disappear. In plain sight. A ghost with influence. A shadow with presence. That's real power. In Part 4, we'll expose the psychological blueprint of control, how to make people move, obey, and submit without force, without raising your voice, without saying a word they can use against you. You will learn the laws of frame manipulation, status engineering, and silent behavioral dominance, the kind that leaves no trace. Power is not about who is stronger. It's about who defines the frame and who accepts it. Most people never notice the frame they're living in. They respond to tone, context, and expectation without ever questioning who created the rules. But you're going to stop living inside other people's frames. You're going to learn how to set the stage so that they submit without realizing it. Let's be clear, whoever controls the frame controls the outcome. Whoever controls the frame doesn't need to argue. Whoever controls the frame already won before the game began. So, what is a frame? It's not about power on the surface. It's the psychological container that defines how every interaction is interpreted. Think about this. A woman laughs when a man flirts with her at a bar because the man controlled the frame. This is play. That same joke in a courtroom, disrespect. The judge controls the frame. This is hierarchy. The same words, same action, but the meaning changes because the frame changed. This is where most men fail. They enter someone else's frame and try to win. You never win inside someone else's frame. You redefine the room, or you lose by default. So how do you take control of the frame? 1. Be the least reactive person in the room. The most reactive person always adopts the other's frame. Someone insults you. If you defend yourself, you've accepted their framing. You're beneath me. Prove otherwise. Someone challenges your idea. If you explain it, you've accepted their frame. You need permission to be valid. But the man who controls the frame never reacts. He doesn't defend. He doesn't explain. He lets the words fall flat and controls the emotional rhythm. Let them escalate. Let them get louder. Let them reveal their insecurity while you remain still. Because power is not taken by force. It's yielded by others when they see you can't be moved. 2. Assume dominance as a default, not a performance. You never ask for status. You embody it. The way you enter a room, the way you take your time, the way you pause before responding, the way you withhold approval instead of chasing it. Most people talk to fill silence. You use silence to expose them. Most people seek validation. You become the validator. You don't say, "I'm high status." You act in ways that make them assume it. When you don't rush to respond, they chase your attention. When you don't react emotionally, they lower their tone. When you speak with economy, they hang on your words. Machiavelli called this appearing merciful, faithful, humane, honest, and religious, while being the opposite when necessary, because perception is power, and the person who controls perception doesn't need permission. 3. Control the emotional tone of every interaction. People mirror the emotional baseline of the strongest presence. If you're calm, they adjust. If you're uncertain, they dominate. If you show discomfort, they push further. So the key is to become the emotional anchor. Let's say someone raises their voice. Most people match it or retreat. But you don't. You stay calm, not out of passivity, but strategy. Because now, their energy looks unstable. They're emotional. You're composed. And everyone watching has subconsciously chosen their leader. Even in one-on-one conversations, this law holds. The person who controls the emotional climate controls the power dynamic. This is why people in high positions rarely display emotion publicly, not because they don't feel, but because emotion reveals priority. And revealing priority reveals leverage points. And leverage is everything. 4. Give people something to prove, not something to receive. Here's the manipulation most never notice. The moment you make people want something from you, status, approval, attention, they enter your frame. Now you don't chase, they do. And when people are chasing, they rationalize, they explain themselves, they project. All you have to do is withhold. Not cruelly, strategically. You don't need to insult them. You just need to make them feel they haven't won you over. And suddenly, without force, they try harder. They respect more. They listen closer. Why? Because power is not about what you do to them. It's about what they're doing to themselves in your presence. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. The prince never needs to convince. He only needs to let others convince themselves. He doesn't fight to hold power. He creates a world where they are afraid to lose his approval. That is silent control. That is submission without force. That is high-level frame mastery. Now let's be clear. You will be tested, challenged, poked constantly. But if you've built internal silence, strategic opacity, and frame control, you don't need to defend. You don't need to explain. You don't need to fight. You've already won because they're playing inside your game. And once they're inside, their freedom ends where your presence begins. In Part 5, we reach the final layer. What it means to be untouchable. No validation, no noise, no public image. Just results, impact, presence. You will become the man no one understands, but everyone watches. You've been conditioned to think power is loud, that it walks with a spotlight, that it needs applause, recognition, dominance. But that's not real power. That's theater. The real kind, the kind that shapes outcomes, bends people, and survives, is invisible. It walks in silence. It doesn't demand. It doesn't beg. It doesn't prove. It simply is. And the man who holds it is untouchable. Not because no one tries to reach him, but because even when they do, he never bends. Let's be clear. Being untouchable isn't about being liked. It's about being outside the reach of their emotional hooks. When they insult, you don't respond. When they flatter, you don't melt. When they challenge, you don't rise. When they leave, you don't chase. Because nothing they do defines you. They can't use shame. They can't use affection. They can't use silence, because you've detached your identity from how you're perceived. This is what destroys most men. They need to be liked. They need to be understood. They need to be seen as good. So they explain, they over-clarify, they defend themselves against whispers. But an untouchable man lets it all burn, because he knows the moment you start defending yourself, you're admitting they have the power to accuse. You don't need to be understood. You need to be unexplainable. A man who moves without announcement, who commands without demand, who influences without appearance. Machiavelli would call this the most dangerous man in the room. The vulgar crowd always is taken by appearances, and the world consists chiefly of the vulgar. So what do? You give them the appearance of calm, the appearance of neutrality, the appearance of distance, and behind it, your real power grows. Quietly, strategically, brutally, not as reaction, but as design. You are no longer proving anything. You are becoming a psychological presence. When you leave a room, the energy doesn't rise, it drops. When you speak, They listen not because they like you, but because they can't afford not to. When your name comes up, it brings silence, not noise. That is the mark of the untouchable. Here's how it looks in the real world. You don't argue in relationships. You disappear when disrespected. And when you return, it's on your terms or not at all. You don't explain to coworkers. They learn to adapt to your standards or get replaced by someone who does. You don't need friends who mock your silence. You have presence, they have noise. Let them speak. Let them reveal their need to be heard. You are no longer playing for approval, because you finally learned approval is currency for the powerless. They crave it, they chase it, they mold themselves for it. You build something greater. Your power is no longer social, it's existential. Your voice is rare, your attention is expensive, your presence is earned. And when they try to play games, you let them, because you've already left the board. Let them guess. Let them wonder. Let them think they've won right before they realize you were never playing their game. You don't dominate with force. You dominate with absence. You dominate by being the standard they never reach. This is not philosophy. This is survival. This is mastery. This is real-world power, the kind that doesn't show up on timelines or in group chats. It shows up in results, in influence without attachment, in decisions without noise, in victories without applause. The men who shape the world are never the loudest. They are the ones you feel, even when they're not in the room. And now, you become one of them. No more defending. No more sharing what doesn't need to be said. No more needing to be seen. Let them underestimate you. Let them misread your silence. Let them wonder why nothing they say affects you. Because you've finally done it. You've exited the game of reaction. You've destroyed the need to be liked. You've killed the boy who needed permission and become the man who sets the terms. You are not what they want. You are what they can't touch. And from this point forward, you don't speak to be heard. You don't act to be loved. You don't fight to be understood. You exist. You observe. You rule. Without words. Without emotion. Without fear. You are no longer trying to be powerful. You have simply become a presence they can't explain and a man they will never recover from.